Welcome to another episode of the Feature Presentation Podcast, where every week we take a deep dive into the trenches of independent filmmaking. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and this week I am really excited to welcome executive producer Terissa Kelton to the show. Terissa, how are you?
Hi, Derek. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. I've been really excited, because we've had this on the books for a while now for us to chat on the show. And I believe it was the podcastguest.com website, which is actually a pretty good resource if you're a podcaster.
Yeah, I've loved it. I've loved the experience. And yes, I think we've had this on for a few months. So finally getting to do it. I'm very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're currently located in Los Angeles. We were just kind of talking how I don't know about you, but being from Florida, we savor those first couple of months of fall because it's actually tolerable to go outside for more than a couple of minutes. So how are things out there?
I mean, it's a little backwards right now. We're going through another heat wave. We've been sort of sitting in a heat wave for the past couple of weeks. It cooled down to like normal temperature, and now we're back up in the high 90s. And it's like a blow dryer blowing you, which is so unusual for Los Angeles. But as I mentioned, I'm from Texas, so I'm used to hot summers. And then, like you, being very appreciative of early fall, and then dealing with, cold, not snowy, but definitely cold weather in the winter. So Los Angeles right now is keeping us on our toes, but I think it'll calm down here in the next little while.
Yeah, I've been out there a couple of times. It seems like the place that's just going to do that anyway. If it's not the weather, it's something else that'll always be keeping you on your toes.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Always surprises to be had.
So you mentioned that you're originally from Texas, and I always like to start the conversations with this because there's not really a how-to guidebook on how to get into film. Everybody kind of has their own unique way, and it's another reason why the industry fascinates me so much. What was it for you that made you get into the crazy world of filmmaking?
How I got on this wild ride. Yeah, so I grew up and I just had a love of film and television. I watched a lot of it. I homeschooled for a lot of my childhood and into my teen years. So television and film and video games were kind of my friends. And when I went to public school for the first time, it was my junior year and I was 14. So very much younger than my peer group, very sort of fish out of water, like didn't really know how to approach everything that I was going through. And I took a speech class, and the speech class was also sort of a drama class. And I just kind of inadvertently got involved in acting and kind of being a performer. And I really liked that, especially in high school, because it was a way to sort of mask my anxiety and, kind of dive into someone else for a while. So it was kind of therapeutic in a weird way. But that's how I found my way into storytelling. From high school, I took it into college and just continued to fall in love with it, got deeper and deeper into it. When I went to college, I went to Texas State University, and I wasn't getting a lot of stage roles. I was auditioning and I wasn't getting a lot of stage roles that were happening there. So I thought, well, I'm right next to Austin, Texas, which is where there's a ton of independent film. So let me try my hand there. And I was very lucky very early on. I got involved with a micro budget independent film company. I was an extra for a couple of days on a movie they were doing. And I loved it so much, and I loved everyone involved. I basically told them, I will come on set and hold a mic. I will be a PA, like whatever you need on the days that I'm not acting, I'll be there. And they let me come back, and I just became really good friends with them. I worked on over a 5-year period. I worked on 10 different features, a number of short films. I got to direct a couple of short films. I was a DP on a short film. Found out very quickly I did not want to be a DP, but I have so much respect for cinematographers in general. And then and then during that time, I got involved behind the scenes in a producerial role, from script development to pre-production, production, post. I was also still acting. And then I would go, I would spend a lot of my vacation time going on the festival circuit with films, which was really, really cool, and some of the best times of my life. And yeah, that was my entry point into it. And I did that, like I said, for about 5 years. And then I decided, after one of my films got into Austin Film Festival, it was right around the time that streaming was kind of taking over. The industry was changing a lot. I was really interested in how to take, those great films that we had made and really get them in front of an audience. What was that there was sort of a disconnect between getting films made, which you could do in a really scrappy, unique way, a micro budget independent film, and getting it in front of audiences and getting marketing and advertisement behind it. And that was sort of a something that I wanted to bridge. So I decided in the top of 2015 to move to Los Angeles. And, I knew very few people out in Los Angeles. I knew a couple of people I had met in college who had moved out there. Um, and, I got there. I was still acting and also looking for producerial roles. And I got involved first. One of my first jobs was actually, I was a construction coordinator for a movie called Scouts Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, or Scouts versus Zombies. It was a Paramount movie. I have a great uncle who turned out to be a great great uncle, who is a construction supervisor, and he heard through the grapevine that I was out there. I probably hadn't talked to him in like 10 years, and he said, "Listen, I'm working on this film, and we need a coordinator. Do you want to come up to Santa Clarita, up to Sable Ranch, and help me out?" And I was like, I have no idea where that is or what that is, but yeah, let's do it. And so I spent like the first 2 months of 2015 going up to this really cool location and watching these guys build sets for pickup shots for that movie. And then I got to see them load it in, and then I got to see them shoot it. And it just really was a great experience to have right off the bat in Los Angeles, because it was like that movie magic moment. Um, I was always like just beaming, and these guys who were like all construction guys and painters and carpenters were always like, "You are just so excited for this. This is like their day-to-day job." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you built a pool." I'm just so thrilled. Um, and so yeah, so that really solidified for me. I was like, great, I feel like I made the right move, coming to Los Angeles. That job ended, and I did the acting thing for a little bit, and honestly, like, it just sort of wasn't it. I didn't have the joy that I had when I was in Austin. I had kind of been part of a troupe, an acting troupe, there with the film company, and I missed that part of it. And so I really just threw all of my focus into sort of the executive producer avenue. I had a friend who was an assistant at Rehab Entertainment, and she, was wanting to move on, and she said, "You should apply." And I did. And I went in and I met the principal there, John Hyde, who was a veteran producer, had, going all the way back into the 80s, where he did Short Circuit, Fly the Navigator, Never Ending Story. For a time, he oversaw a company called Film Roman and oversaw The Simpsons and King of the Hill. He'd also done lots of TV, lots of film, all across genre, all across platform, which I was really excited about, because I feel like I have project ADD, which means I don't like to do the same kind of project. I don't want to just do animation or live action or kids or horror or sci-fi. I like to do lots of different things. And so his background really aligned with what I wanted to do. And we worked together for about 6 months. And then, he basically gave me this really great opportunity. He wanted someone to sort of pass the baton to. He still wanted to continue working, but he really needed someone to run the operation, the company day to day, help him put together a slate. And that's what I started doing. probably the summer of 2015. And I've been there now for, what are we at now? 7 years. I co-own the company as of the top of 2020, which was a crazy time to start owning an entertainment company in Los Angeles. Let me tell you. 3 months after that, I was like, "What have I done?" But it all turned out really, really good. Actually, we had our first green light actually in 2020 for Harriet the Spy, which is an animated series that's on Apple TV Plus now. Um, and yeah, just over those last 7 years, we've slowly grown our slate. We have lots of really cool things in development. Um, the differences between indie film and what I do now. Um, there's a lot of similarities. There are a lot of differences. There are some days where I miss the sort of scrappy, let's go out and get a movie shot and made in a year and go on the festival circuit and run with it. There's a lot more time that you spend in development here, and especially studio movies. A lot more legal business affairs work that I never thought I would be handling, and it's about probably 50% of my job now. So, um, yeah, that's a lot of talking I've been doing about that journey, but that's kind of how I got on the wild ride and what I've been doing since then.
Well, I want to go back to something you said early about during your time acting and how it was almost therapeutic to you in a way because you were getting to be someone else. I was told when I first started really working on films here locally a few years ago, using your art as therapy isn't good, but I disagree with that because if you use it in a positive way,
Mm-hmm.
I think that how can you really knock that if you're using it to better yourself? So like when I made my first short film, I wasn't in a good headspace at the time because of multiple personal reasons, but
Mm-hmm.
making it and almost getting myself lost in it helped get me out of that. So I appreciate you saying that because it kind of reaffirms what I've been telling people, that it can be used for therapy. Like it can be used for good and not just for entertainment purposes.
Most definitely. And I will tell you, one of my favorite projects that we have on the slate now actually came from sort of another deeply personal place. I turned 30 a few years ago, and when I turned 30, I started getting a lot of questions about when are you becoming a mother? When are you having children? You need to start doing that now, now, now. And it was very jarring because suddenly I was responsible for this thing, this life that I didn't even know if I wanted yet. And so I really started exploring. I wanted to explore more because I knew other women were experiencing it, and definitely men are part of this experience as well. I wanted to explore that more, and so I started going out and talking to female filmmakers and writers, and just getting their experience, and in the horror space, especially asking if they're, do you have a pitch for something in that vein that talks about sort of the paranoia and fears um, of being a woman, and maybe being pregnant and still doubting that process, and if that's what you want to do with your life, and then feeling all the societal pressures and all of the personal pressures around you. And I found a writer who had this great take on a public domain short story that we're now developing into a feature film. And to this day, it's like we're still developing it, and I'm still thinking about all of the experiences that I have and all the fears that sometimes pop up, and paranoia that pops up. We'll have conversations and find ways to put those nuggets of things in there. And that's just another example of what you're talking about, where that project came out of, again, just kind of being nervous and anxious about this thing that was happening, and wanting to find an outlet for that. And I think that's a big part of movie making, like yeah, you want it to be good and entertaining, but it comes from deep fears and deep, very human experiences. So I completely agree.
Well, that's the beauty of filmmaking is that you can tell so many different kinds of stories. Like, yeah, you can tell your goofy comedies or you can come up with cool horror, but you can use elements of real life, and those are usually those stories that resonate the most. With you talking about this film that you're working on, I can't think of any movie that I've seen or heard of that really delves into the topic of having and raising kids, because it is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned, the societal pressures, like it's almost like it almost makes you feel obligated to have
Right.
kids. Because I get where you're coming from as well, because my wife and I, we got married a few months
Mm-hmm.
ago, and we get asked all the time, when are you
You
guys
get the
having kids? And
question.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
when we're ready. Like it's a life-changing thing. Like
Yeah.
it's not that simple. So no, I think that's great. I'm really really fascinated to see that once it's made.
Yes, very excited. Very excited for that one. And just generally, when I'm coming up with ideas for projects, we obviously we get projects that are pitched to us. We work with a lot of IP, and so sometimes you don't have the same flexibility. But if I'm like working on a concept, it usually comes from personal experience and wanting to dive into, a point of view or a situation that I haven't seen a lot. Um, or if I have seen it, I want to like, what if it's done this way or that way? What is another way to tell this story from this perspective? And um, yeah, I think I think for me, if I wasn't able to do that, I don't think it would be worth it. It's a big part of what I do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because in the two films that I've made, I've used elements, like not just straight up adaptations of what's happened in real life, but you take certain nuggets and elements of the truth and you can incorporate them into the overall story you want to tell. And it usually works. And that's, like I said, that's the beauty of filmmaking.
Yeah, you're putting in your authentic experience into it. And it's because it's all about, the feeling of it. What does that feel like? And if you felt it and you can translate that and they make other people feel it, you've done the job. That's the dream.
I consider that more of an accomplishment than, I mean, I think making the audience laugh is great and making them feel good is wonderful as well. But when you can make them kind of just sit there and think, that kind of that deeper meaning of what you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
tell, that's when you've made something really special.
Yeah, when they leave and they're still talking about it, and yeah, that's one of the, going back to the pregnancy horror, that's one of the things that, one of our goals is, we really want people to take away, men and women, take away the experience and go, oh yeah, like I've never thought about I've never thought about that before. That's drawing attention to things that maybe some people just haven't thought about. Um, and people who have thought about it who didn't think they could talk about it, giving them that, that ability to say, oh yeah, that movie, like I know what that's like. Yeah, it's a very therapeutic, and like I said, you lead on what you know, which is your own experiences.
Absolutely. So kind of going into your role as an executive producer, because for those who might be new to the show or new to the aspect of the film industry, there are different kinds of producers. You have your line
Mm-hmm.
producer, you have your regular producers. What exactly is the role of an executive producer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what John and I do on our projects, as executive producers, we're a very small company and it's just the two of us. So we bring in pitches, we have creative meetings with filmmakers, with writers, we work with other companies, especially other buyers who are the people who are financing and distributing the movies, to see what they're looking for, what their appetite is, and then sort of using that information and going to those writers and filmmakers that we know are working on those kinds of concepts and working on those kinds of projects. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle. When I describe what I do, I'm putting together a lot of different pieces. If we have an animated project, what animation studio could we go to and work with? Are there specific animators or animation writers, animation showrunners that we want to go out to? If we get a pitch, we might say, oh, you know what, I know HBO Max is looking for things like this, Netflix is looking for things like this. So it's a lot of matchmaking. We're also very creatively involved, also very involved in business affairs and legal. So a lot of the times what we do, especially when we're dealing with filmmakers and creatives, is we really try to be sort of an umbrella between the deal making part and the creative part for them, because it is doing both can be very difficult. Even in my role, sometimes it's like going from looking at a legal document all day to like trying to flip to doing creative notes on a script is can be a little bit crazy. And so, our role sometimes is to just help shield the creatives from having to deal with that, and just being there to help communicate to them, what the deal making process is like. They'll obviously have their own lawyers and agents and things as well who are figuring stuff out for them. But we consider ourselves sort of a bridge between creative and business affairs. And then once one of our projects is in production, normally we are not the day-to-day creative producer. So for example, on Harriet the Spy, which is an animated series, I first of all, I didn't come from animation. So when we got this project and it was like the first project that was greenlit and had this, major distribution deal with Apple TV, I was like, well, I feel like I don't know what to do because I've never done animation. What is this? And so, we had a very strong animation producer, Sydney Clifton, come on board. The Jim Henson Company was also involved in that production, and they have a ton of animation experience. John, my partner, ran an animation company. So I was in great hands and I got to learn a lot. But our role on that as executive producers was really overseeing the production, um, uh, sort of on a macro. So we weren't day to day on it, but we were making, we were doing script notes when the scripts came in. We were doing artwork notes. We helped, help build the visual style of the world. We were also part of casting, part of, music, which was a big part of the series. Um, so very much part of the creative, just not necessarily running it like a showrunner or like a line producer or like a producer would be doing.
And I love that you keep mentioning the creative aspect, because those who might be new to film, if you're an actor or a writer, director, there is that business side to the industry
Mm-hmm.
that may not seem
Mm-hmm.
like the most fun or the most attractive or sexy
Mm-hmm.
position, but it's still very important. But I like that you mentioned the creative and how you're kind of that bridge between the creative and the business. So as someone who did come from acting and then eventually got involved with the producing and behind the scenes type of thing, was that an important thing to you when you became a producer? Was you still wanted to have that kind of creative vision in mind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I I don't think I could do a job that would be solely like legal business affairs, like deep financing stuff. I can do all of that, but I would want to be able to do the creative part. The creative part's really important to me. The storytelling is very important to me. The relationships with the writers and filmmakers and creators is very important. And now that I've done animation, my relationship with artists and animators is very important. It's these are the people who are doing the work, who are on the ground, and I think it's important, um, to to be working with them in a really meaningful way and to be part of the creative process, at least for me. Um, I think I was listening to a podcast with Kevin Smith, and he was talking about how back in the day, executive producers were like, oh, I'm gonna make money off of this. It was like cartoon character, like cigar smoking executives. And now you actually have a lot of people who are in the industry who are creatives, who came from an acting background, or came from a writing background, and they really do want to hone kind of their own creative craft and help along other writers and filmmakers. So it's a very important part of my job.
You beat me to the impression of the old school producer that's just sitting at their desk banging their fist. No, make money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're still out there, and it is an important, making money is a part of it. Excuse me. But um I would just feel like a dry well if I didn't have the creative part of it, because I do like to put myself into, I mean, like we were just talking about, my experiences and my own fears and desires and wants. I like to put those nuggets into whatever project I'm working on, even if it's not something I'm directly conceptualizing or conceiving, like even in Harriet the Spy, which was an IP, very well known IP. Louise Fitzhugh had a very specific vision in that book. We really stuck with that vision, but there were still, moments where I was like, well, if she's going through whatever she's going through, she probably feels like maybe like I did when this and this happened, or what does that feel like? How can we use that to try to communicate that in whatever way, in the series, whether it was in script form or automatic, or something that was specific to artwork that we were sort of trying to craft and find a style for. So, um, yes, long answer.
Well, and that's actually a great segue because I really wanted to ask you about the Harriet the Spy series because during research for this interview, that's where I discovered the
Mm-hmm.
series on Apple TV Plus. And when I thought of it, I initially thought of the movie that Nickelodeon made in the 90s because
Mm-hmm.
I still remember almost like it was yesterday going to see that movie in the theater. I couldn't tell you what I had for lunch 3 days ago, but I could tell you that I went to the theater to go see Harriet the Spy because I was just such a Nickelodeon fanatic. Like I think I was the
Mm-hmm.
perfect age for that generation of Nickelodeon.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to see it, and for those that don't know about it, it was a movie in the '90s that starred Michelle Trachtenberg and Rosie O'Donnell. Fun movie. I still remember enjoying it to this day, and
Yeah.
I love the art style of the animated
Mm-hmm.
series because
Oh,
I
thank you.
feel I feel like too many modern animated shows rely on that kind of CG looking
Mm-hmm.
animation. It's almost like because I think we're roughly the same age. If you remember that
Mm-hmm.
animated series Reboot that was on ABC,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so what a lot of the animation today reminds me of. So because I
Yeah.
miss that like hand drawn,
Nostalgic.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the nostalgic like hand drawn type of animation. Because with Harriet the Spy, it looks like you're watching a storybook that's literally come to life, and I
Mm-hmm.
wish more animated shows would do that because the animation is so beautiful in this series.
I love hearing that. I mean, our goal, when we were pitched the book, immediately it was how do we adapt this? Which any IP that we get, it's a whole set of what are we adapting? What's the heart and soul of the project? What do audiences love about it? And for Harriet, it had a lot of adaptations. I'm a big fan of the Nickelodeon movie as well. When I remember, I kind of like blacked out when it was being pitched to us, because I was just like thinking about the movie and like, how is this happening that I'm being pitched this project, this movie that I grew up on? Like, it was crazy. But what we really wanted to do is we looked at why people loved and why people remembered Harriet. And it was because she inspired a lot of writers, first of all. And that the whole premise of the book is actually she wants to be a writer. That's why she's a spy in the first place. And a lot of the time the adaptations kind of wanted to lean on like the spying and the tool belt, and like that's the more like toyetic, sort of, fun aspect of that story. And so we were like, well, how can we really hone in on the fact that she's trying to become a writer while still keeping it really fun and adventurous. She has all these crazy adventures in the book. She's kind of a hardcore character too. I mean, she writes everything she writes down in her journal is like 10% mean, it's like biting. It was one of the reasons the book was banned, which is one of my favorite things about the book, is that it was banned in a lot of places because it featured a girl, a little 11-year-old girl who was just kind of, doing whatever she wanted and saying whatever she wanted. Um, but going back to the adaptation, we wanted to take it back to what Louise Fitzhugh did in the book. We wanted to take it back to 1964. We wanted to take it back to New York. We really wanted to stay true to the book as much as possible. And it hadn't been done in animation before. And animation was a perfect way to be able to go back to 1964 New York. And it was also a perfect way to get inside Harriet's head in a way that had never been done before. um you know she's this kind of quirky, kooky character, and in our animated series you get to see literally what she's imagining. And it's wild in there, it's wild in her head, and we really wanted to show that as a way to make it make sense why she is the way she is, why she's writing down the things she's writing down, why she's acting the way she is. She goes through a lot of like emotional upheavals in the book as well as in the series, and we really wanted to be able to showcase all of her actions and reasonings behind what she was doing from her perspective and her point of view. We were able to do that in animation. Our showrunner, Wilma Craw, who, you might remember from The Adventures of Pete and Pete and tons of other amazing Nickelodeon and shows of that era, he was the perfect person to hone in on that. We all wanted it to feel nostalgic, and we all were sort of looking at artwork from like this from the 60s, from that time period. And I think what we ended up getting with Will's sensibility and Titmouse, who was our animation studio, amazing, beautiful, beautiful artists and animators there, great to work with. What we all sort of distilled it down into was this, yeah, it kind of looks like 60s, but it also kind of looks like 90s animation. And I really got excited about that because, like you said, like that was the era that I was really watching a ton of animation, Nick 90s, and so I don't think any of us were like, we want it for it to remind us of the 90s animation style. It was more of like we wanted to go back to the 60s. And then I think we just all sort of, with our input and our collaboration, kind of took it into this more nostalgic, timeless, but still reminiscent of the Nick 90s.
Well, I think setting it in the 60s was the right decision because classic, New York, from you can even go back to the 20s and 30s,
Mm-hmm.
has a very distinct look. And I think that even added to the beauty of the look of the animation, whereas if you had went into like a more contemporary setting, like
Mm-hmm.
the live action movie did at the time, this I think really captured something that made it feel different than the movie, which is a good thing. And you actually answered something that I've been curious about for really years as far as dealing with adaptations, is when you take a pre-existing property, whether it's a book, if you're remaking a movie, or whatever the case may be, what the process is of going into what do you adapt, because there's always subtle changes when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to adaptations, is what goes into deciding what you're going to adapt and what you're going to leave out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different for every single one. So, like I said, on Harriet, it was really sticking to the source material as much as possible and using, animation to dive into that even more. On something like Flight of the Navigator, that's what what does the audience love about Flight of the Navigator? What do we all love? Well, it's aspirational. We're flying in a spaceship. Um, it's also a little dark. We have a kid who gets knocked out, wakes up. He's the same age, but all of his family and friends are almost 10 years older, and it changes the dynamic that he has with them completely. And he's isolated and he's alone, and his only sense of friendship is now in this spaceship. And but yeah, he has no memory of how they came to be, and what's going on. And so, we wanted to keep those themes. We wanted, obviously, you have to keep the spaceship. You have to have the flying around in a spaceship. But what you can change is that one, we thought you could bring it into modern day. You don't have to keep it in a certain time period. It's gonna have a similar feel, really any time period you go. Um, Characters can change. There's not a specific, you can't do Harriet the Spy without Harriet, right? But in Fly the Navigator, that the kiddo can change. It can be a different, family setup. It's really about the major themes of that movie that, draw people to it, and the tone of, yes, it's kind of dark and scary, but it's also hilarious because it's a 12-year-old kid and this really, funny, weird personality in a spaceship. We also have the adorable animals in the spaceship, which everyone loves. So, and then on something like Short Circuit, again going back to sort of characters, everyone cares about Johnny Five. Like you could put, it doesn't matter what's going on in that movie as long as it's Johnny Five. And so, um, on that one, which is, we're still in pretty early development on that, still trying to kind of figure out what that adaptation is going to look like. But my opinion is you can't really do a reboot of that movie, in my opinion. To do a reboot would be really weird. Like Johnny Five was kind of the first robot of his of the air of this people in this lifetime, in the 80s. Like he kind of kicked it off. Wally looks a lot like Johnny Five. You have all kind of robots now. A new robot in 2022 would look like a Boston Dynamics robot or a humanoid or something. So how do you keep Johnny Five, the Johnny Five we all know and love, and try to put him into today in a new and interesting way? And then what other, let's see, adaptations? Working on a preschool adaptation of a book that's about forest animals. What better way to bring really adorable forest animals to life than with puppetry? And that's a project that we're working on too, where that was super important, is for, especially it's in preschool. So being able to bring to life really tactile looking characters, that, if you're 5 and you're looking at them, they look really real to you, and really, adorable and soft, and they look like the animals that they are in the books. And there's, instead of going sort of a storybook animation style, which we could easily do, taking it more into, oh, this looks like I could reach out and pet this, little creature, and that's what we want. I think that's what our audience is going to want. So like I said, lots of different ways to think about them. But just always trying to find, what those key elements are that people love about the property, and don't touch those. And then whatever you change, change in such a way that, you're inviting a new audience, maybe a more modern audience, to come in and have a good time with the property as well.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, as long as you capture the heart and soul of what made the original version
Mm-hmm.
great and popular, you
Yeah.
can tweak other things too. And it's, I think we've really been seeing that, because I can remember years ago you'd think, oh, a movie's just going to get remade,
Right.
or there's just going to be a reboot. But now
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing, almost like they call them, I guess, legacy sequels, because you have these sequels that will take place decades after you're the original, like we see with Cobra Kai and how popular
Mm-hmm.
that's been over the
Mm-hmm.
last several years. And it's taking these characters that we know and love, but then putting them in a more contemporary setting, and it works. And I
Mm-hmm.
I hope we see more of it with some different properties as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I first was starting out and we had so many adaptations on the slate, I remember getting so much oh, you're doing a reboot, and I was like, oh no. So we really tried to avoid, like, I'm very sensitive about it. So I'm like, no, it's good. It's gonna be good. Like, I promise. We're thinking it through. We're not just, slapping the title, an IP title on something that's not servicing the fan base, or even making a fun movie. That's not what we want to do. So I agree. I think I think people are, again, I think it kind of goes back to executives who are coming into play, who are like more creative and more in tune with what the fan bases want and what audiences want, and they're just smarter about it in general. Um, and I hope I'm with that group of people in my adaptations that I'm doing as well.
No, and I think you will be. And like you said, it's cool that creatives are also moving into that kind of business and behind the scenes role,
Mm-hmm.
because I think with them having the experience and knowing what it's like to be on that creative side will
Yeah.
only help out the business side. Not to say that, it worked for decades, but I think we're going to, over the next 10 to 20 years, see even more successful, say, adaptations and
Mm-hmm.
other films as well that are really, really creatively strong. And plus, now that, it seems like we're at the end of the tunnel or close to the end of it with the pandemic. I remember having these conversations with writers and directors during the pandemic who weren't able to physically make anything because everybody
Right.
was on lockdown.
Right.
We're seeing this huge surge of creativity because people were writing stories, coming up with other
Mm-hmm.
ideas, and now that they can physically go out and do them, we're seeing all this content. And plus, with Apple TV Plus, with Paramount, Disney,
Yeah.
Netflix, there's so much content out there that it's almost impossible to watch everything you want to, because it'll be
Oh
like
my
you
God.
have a conversation at work and they're like, "Oh, did you see this show on Hulu?" "No, but
Right.
I know about it." "But did you see the
Right.
show on Paramount Plus?" "No, I haven't got to see it yet." There's just so much out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there definitely is. And I think going back to what you were saying about people creating during quarantine, another place that we started discovering a lot of great content were a lot of webtoons. And that was something that people could do, could manage to put together over the pandemic. Artists and writers, or illustrator writers, were able to tell stories and put them up online, and now they're getting noticed, now that people are looking for content, to bring to the TV film format. And that's really exciting because there was so much of that going on. I'm just really thankful for technology that made that possible. I think that's another cool thing about where we're headed in the next 10 to 15, 20 onward years is the accessibility of writers and creators to be able to create and showcase their work, in a very public way. And sort of gone are the days where you have to move out to New York or Los Angeles to make it. It's like you literally shoot your own movie on your phone. You could use Unreal Engine to do some cool animated stuff, Blender to make some cool stuff. I think, there's tons of what's great about a lot of the technology that's coming out is that the culture behind it is very much like, please take it. Please take this platform. Please take this technology and create with it. We'll get involved when you make $1 million bought, see you later. You know what I mean? Like, they want you to use it. And they want to see people benefit from it, creators benefit and profit from it. And I think that's really cool. And I think it's a great time in a lot of ways to be a creator because there is a lot more accessibility, a lot more resources. People are a Zoom away, you know. It's incredible. I was doing a voiceover class a few months ago, and there was one guy who was from the Netherlands. It was like 4 a.m. Where he was at. It was like a 12 p.m. LA call, and that's where we're at. You don't have to live Los Angeles to have access to um, people who might call you up and say, "Hey, I want you to write something for me or create something or whatever."
Yeah, and even with podcasting, like 10, 15
Mm-hmm.
years ago, this conversation that you and I are having right now wouldn't be possible.
Right.
But through Zoom and you know good mics, good connection, it can happen. Is
Yeah.
and that's dedication for someone to be on a 4 a.m. call from the Netherlands. Like you
He was
know
great.
they
Yeah.
want it whenever that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
So
It was immediately like I was like, oh, like I already feel like I'm not doing enough. If I'm not up at 4 a.m. doing doing a class, like what am I doing, you know?
a few weeks ago, I had someone on the show who lives in London, so we had to pre-record it, and I had to be on the call at 6 a.m. And even then, I'm just like, I've got my coffee right here, and I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
But now that I hear that, I'm like, I don't really have anything to complain about. So that's
I
awesome
know.
though, and but yeah, the technology just makes everything so great. Like I've been able to work on some sets here and direct my own films, but that wouldn't have been possible 15,
Yeah.
20 years ago, but the technology and the accessibility and having the community around you that's
Community. Mm-hmm.
that's willing to. And I make this joke all the time on the show. I'm not a sociable person by any stretch, which is weird because I have a podcast, but the collaboration is my favorite part of filmmaking because you meet people from different parts of the world. Yeah, they might have different opinions, different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, but everyone comes together because they love film and they want to make a movie happen. And you learn so much from people. And that's why I always tell people, if you want to make a film, surround yourself with people who are better and more experienced than you, because it's going to make you better.
Yeah, absolutely. Your community is one of the most important things. Anytime anyone's moving out to Los Angeles or, wants, advice, I'm just like, find those people who want similar things that you want, who are good at things that you're not good at, who are maybe better than you at things you're good at, who are also rooting for you and who want to collaborate with you. And when you find those people, it really does feel like anything is possible. Because you have a team that can kind of, combine to create whatever you're trying to create. And it's really special. I mean, that's sometimes I miss that about the microfilm world, micro indie world is there was such a cool tight group of people, and when you went out on the festival circuit, that became your community too. And it's sometimes a little tougher in the bigger markets. When you get out to Los Angeles, it's a lot more, people are a little more closer to the chest with projects and information. There are a lot of gatekeeping out here. But there are fantastic people. And when you find them, you keep them. And I've been lucky to be able to find a ton of people out here who, are super helpful on projects and who will introduce me to people that I may not, instead of cold calling, which I do a lot, having a warm intro is always nice. And finding those people who help you in that way is really key, and it helps your, like you were saying, like as someone who's not, doesn't feel like they're very sociable, maybe they're introverted, or there's have a lot of, like, I still carry a lot of social anxiety, like I homeschooled for like nearly 14 years with hardly any other, just a lot of adults and parents and stuff around me. But sometimes I get overwhelmed, and having those people who are like, no, you got it, you're gonna be okay, and I'm gonna help you out. Oh, it means everything.
Absolutely. So as we start to wrap up here, I did want to ask you, as someone who works in the producing side of things, what kind of advice would you give to an aspiring producer or an executive producer?
I would say, to really start finding what your calling card is going to be, get involved with projects. It's easier than ever nowadays to go on social media and connect with people who are working on projects who might need somebody, on a producerial level. Um, I think also reaching out to people who have those roles. There's a lot of, like I was just saying, there are a lot of people who know that there's no straightforward journey, that went through a lot of their own crazy journey to get to where they're at, that are willing to have conversations with people. I would just suggest, if you're try not to come at it like you're trying to sell them on something or pitch them on something immediately. It's really helpful to come at it from just a very, hey, I look up to you because you did this, this, and this, and I'm just curious how you got your start, or just coming at it from more of like just a human angle of, you're someone I look up to, you have really cool things that you're working on. I just want to know more about you and how you did it. Do you have, if you have any advice? And people will give 15 minutes to a half an hour and give that time to you. And I think it's just finding that network and trying to find those opportunities. Obviously, if you're really looking for like an executive track, like go trying to find those jobs. I mean, honestly, with Zoom, I feel like those jobs are even more accessible now, even like creative execs and stuff. Like I know people who are living across the country and Tennessee that are creative execs for production companies in Los Angeles. So, I think it's just finding, if you're not deep in Los Angeles or New York and you're like, how am I ever going to get into this? I think there are opportunities. You just have to find the companies that are offering, remote work if you're not able to move there. Um, or the execs that are there. I think if you reach out and just ask for a 15 to 30-minute conversation, they will gladly do it. There are a lot of executives right now. It's a crazy time in the industry. A lot of them are going through kind of like burnout and like trying to figure out what they want to do, next. And I think coming at them with, a lot of love and compliments, and I want to know how you did it, actually means a lot to them, because you get to go back and think about, why did I decide to do this, and I think some people get to a certain point in their career and sometimes they're like, why am I doing this, and to have a conversation where like, well, I was super excited when I first came out, and then they kind of get re-inspired. So it's a long-winded answer for what people should do, but I think it's connecting with the people that you see yourself wanting, if somebody has a job that you might want in the future, like connect with them. And they might tell you something that you're like, oh, that's not what I want to do, and then you're like, oh, I gotta look for that thing that I actually want to be doing. And that's super helpful too. I think knowledge, and accessibility um, you know, to information about what exactly people are doing is super helpful. And I think it's easier more than ever now.
No, I agree, and it's really at the heart of filmmaking. Is really a lot about the connections that you can make, because that's going to lead to an opportunity, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
meet people on that set. Like with my first film, I met
Yep.
people that I then worked with, on their projects, and then they worked on my next project. So
Yeah.
it's really about networking and building relationships.
Exactly. Exactly. And being patient with the process and with yourself. There were definitely times where I wake up and I'm like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not, I haven't really succeeded in what I'm doing. Like like everyone has that. Even prolific directors and actors, and they all have it. And I think just remembering like stuff doesn't happen overnight. This is a whole process. There are so many things going on that are out of our control. I think everyone realizes that now after going through a pandemic. Like, you just never know what's happening on the other side. Don't let that deter you. If you really want to be doing something, um, just keep doing it. And if you do get burnout, stop doing it for a little bit. It's also okay to venture off and do other things, and you'll come back to it eventually if you love it and you really want to do it. But I know that feeling can be scary sometimes. You know, people are like, "Oh, I no longer feel like I can do this thing, and what will I do? It's my identity." Um, you know, just breathe through that. Let yourself have that. Give yourself that patience, and you know, just continue to do what brings you joy. Follow the energy, as I like to say. Um, you know, with whatever it is you're doing.
Absolutely. Do you have a website or social media you'd like to plug so the viewers and listeners can follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I have a Facebook page. They're all my name, Terissa Kelton. And I have a website. I have a work website, rehabent.com, which lists all the projects that I'm working on. My personal website, terissakelton.com, kind of is just a copy of the work website at this point. But yeah, I'm on social. I try to be on there as much as possible, plugging away at all my projects and supporting other people out there with their projects. You know, I'm one of those people I would, you know, I love having conversations and will gladly give 15 to 30 minutes to anyone who wants to chat about the industry and what's going on. So please, I'd love to have people reach out.
That's awesome. I always like to end the interviews with this. And since you revealed that you're a fellow 90s Nickelodeon fan, I'll make this a two-parter. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Hmm. It's very, very hard, Derek, to answer that. I
It's
will
it's
tell you,
usually never easy.
it's not easy. Um, I think I have to give love to a movie that doesn't get a lot of love normally, and it's called The Imposters. It's a Stanley Tucci movie. Him and Oliver Platt. It's a two-hander comedy. It was made in 1998, but it's set in the 1930s, and it's just this really quirky, crazy comedy with some of the best actors. Tony Shalhoub is in it. Steve Buscemi is in it. Alfred Molina is in it, and it just I laugh hysterically when I watch it every time, and you know, laughing is you know, especially over the last couple of years, been very therapeutic to just laugh through something completely goofy. It's something I share a love with my sister, and we quote it daily. And I highly recommend it. It's about actors, so right up my alley. Any antics that take place on a boat in the middle of the ocean, I'm always about, and that is that movie. So
I dig it. What was your favorite 90s Nickelodeon show growing up?
I think Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold held a really special place in my heart, and it's funny because now I watch it, and there's actually a lot of similarities with Harriet. You know, it's very grounded. I think Arnold's a poet. You know, he goes into these really weird, like imaginative sequences. It's set in the city. I think it was very different from a lot of the other 90s Nick shows in a funny way. That one and Rugrats were probably my two top favorite. And they're all fantastic. They're all great, but those two held sort of a special place.
I love that you mentioned Hey Arnold because when Harriet the Spy, the movie, was released in theaters, that's where they had the first look at the Hey Arnold show. I, and
Yeah.
I remember because the animation was a little different. It had like
Mhm.
these almost like red and yellow, like almost, and like a combination of earth tones too. And then they
Yeah.
changed it and tweaked it a bit whenever it aired on Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
I love the music from Hey Arnold. Like I found a YouTube
Yeah.
playlist of some of the background music, and
Oh,
I find myself listening to it sometimes at work just
so
because it's
fun.
so like it can be
It
catchy, but
makes
it's
you
also very
like,
relaxing.
yeah, yeah. It's like weird Zen music, but it's like bouncy. Yeah, it makes you happy. It's just a really that show made me really happy. And I grew up too with a grandparent as a parent, and I always loved that about Harold. He had, you know, his grandparents.
His
Yeah.
grandma was great.
Oh,
She
she's the
was
best.
hilarious.
Absolutely the best. Yeah, great show.
Fantastic. Well, Terissa, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Once your pregnancy horror film is made, I'd love to have you back on to discuss that because that
I
just
will
sounds so
definitely keep you in the
fascinating.
loop. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and we'll just play my outro music here. If you want to subscribe to the show, just head over to linktree.com/featureprezpod. That's where you can find all the podcast subscription information, where to follow on social media. And don't forget, we are live on YouTube every Monday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's going to do it for this week's show. Be sure to tune in next week for another awesome episode of Feature Presentation with Derek Diamond.